I saw a very touching segment today on Arthur Ashe. It's been 50 years since he's won Wimbledon. And after this segment ended, James Blake and Cliff Drysdale were in the studio. And Cliff got emotional and shared some super interesting stories. I love learning about tennis from back in the day. When my dad was alive, I would ask so many questions about that era of tennis that he was very familiar with. And Cliffy said that he actually helped Arthur Ashe win his first Grand Slam title, which was the 68 US Open, by taking out Rod Laver, who Arthur Ashe had a really difficult time beating. And that opened up the road for Arthur Ashe because he was very comfortable beating Cliff Drysdale, and he ended up beating Tom Ocker in the final of the US Open. He won the Australian Open in 1970, and then that famous Wimbledon title in 1975. Now, interestingly, unrelated to this, I made a video about an interesting technical aspect on the serve, and that is the landing into the court. Now, make sure that you subscribe to my second channel, Intuitive Tennis 24/7, where I post a lot of short form content. I'm going to link that short video that I made in my pinned comment. But in any case, I'm going to summarize this video very quickly. And prior to 1961, players were not allowed to have both feet lift off the ground on the serve. One foot had to remain on the ground. And interestingly, that rule was changed, but it went largely unnoticed. But something fascinating about Arthur Ashe is that he was the first player that I can find, and I study serve technique going all the way back to the wooden racket era, that landed on his left foot. So in modern tennis, you will not find a player that doesn't land on their left foot if they happen to be right-handed, and vice versa if they happen to be left-handed. And interestingly, in the 90s, there were some players who actually, despite being right-handed, landed on their right foot. For example, Gabriele Sabatini and Boris Becker. And in that short form video that I'm referring to, I speculated that the reason why players like Becker and Sabatini landed on the wrong foot, so to speak, could be that it's the remnants of the old school serve technique. Because again, after 1961 and even into the 70s, players were so comfortable leaving one foot off the ground and just pivoting around that front foot with their back foot. And the first player that I can find who landed on the correct foot is Arthur Ashe. And take a look at his serve. It's very much the modern serve that we see nowadays. When I filled out my draw prior to Wimbledon starting, one of the toughest decisions I had to make was deciding whether I'm going to choose Swiatek or Rybakina to make it into the quarterfinals on that bottom half of the draw. And I chose Rybakina because I was very impressed with her performance in Berlin, where she was up 6-2 in the third set tiebreak against Sabalenka. But honestly, I can tell you that if I chose Swiatek, I would have put her all the way to the final. And if you take a look at who's left on that bottom half, it's Andreeva against Navarro, Alexandrova against Bencic, is Swiatek against Tauson, who took out Rybakina. Tauson is a great player, big hitter, incredible backhand down the line. To me, she plays very similar to Amanda Anisimova. So when she's on, she's very dangerous and can beat a lot of great players. On the other hand, Rybakina had an off day and was missing a lot of easy shots. But I think Iga is going to be the big favorite in this match because it's most likely going to be on center court. And Tauson will have to deal with nerves potentially. And this is the type of match that can be quite comfortable for Iga. But if Tauson plays well, of course, she's going to have a chance to take Iga out. But my feeling is that Iga makes it through that one and makes the quarterfinals. And if Iga comes through Tauson, she will possibly play Samsonova in the quarterfinals, and then possibly Andreeva in the semis. She is the favorite, but I actually picked Navarro to beat her. Navarro is playing exceptionally well. She's a great grass court player, very crafty, great mover, and grass isn't necessarily Andreeva's best surface, but Alexandrova and Bencic, those two players have the capability of making it all the way to the final. Alexandrova, one of the best servers on tour, and Belinda Bencic, phenomenal grass court player. So the bottom half of the women's draw is very interesting, but my gut feeling is that Iga will make it to the final. And I'm kind of feeling Agassi vibes here. Remember when Agassi won Wimbledon in 1992 against Goran? And nobody expected Agassi to win his first Grand Slam title on grass because he had refused to play on grass prior to that. Now, the situation is not that similar in Iga's case, but after not being able to win the gold medal at Roland Garros, Iga has been struggling. And I just feel that this could be a tournament where she could turn her career around and start dominating again. Now let's take a look at the men's draw. And there's really nothing to look at on the top half because there's a huge discrepancy between Djokovic, Alcaraz, and Sinner and the rest of the tour. And no disrespect to the other guys. I'm going to talk about them in a little bit, but I want to share my opinion on why Djokovic and Alcaraz lost last year at the US Open. And I do think it had something to do with the Olympics. There was a hangover for both of those guys. I don't think we're going to see those upsets this year. And there's a clear discrepancy in level. And it's hard for me to believe that somebody can take out Sinner or Djokovic on the top half. And it's going to be very difficult for someone to take out Alcaraz because he's been extremely clutch. Of course, Alcaraz has had more trouble compared to Djokovic and Sinner, who have been on absolute fire. Sinner barely losing any games. It was tough today for Martinez, who had a shoulder problem. He wasn't serving very fast, and he still gave a great effort, I thought, fighting. But how can you beat Sinner on grass without a serve? It was tough for him to even collect games. So I thought Martinez, despite his injury, did quite well. Djokovic played flawless tennis, up 2 breaks in the third and 2 sets to love. And Kecmanovic ended up getting a break, holding serve. And Djokovic showed, for the first time in a match, a dip in level. He served a double fault in that game where he was serving for the match and started shaking his head and followed that up with another double fault. But one thing I've been noticing with Djokovic, especially this year, is how well he's been serving. His serve has improved a lot. I made a video about his very intricate and small serve changes during the Australian Open. But another thing that I've been noticing is the following. Next time you watch Novak play, when the serve game gets close, let's say it's 30 all or deuce, you better believe Novak is coming up with a clutch serve, Pete Sampras style. And that's exactly what happened in today's match against Kecmanovic. Despite serving 2 double faults in a row, 30 all in that game, Djokovic serves an ace. And I do think this is an important shot for him if he wants to have a chance against Sinner. And I've said many times this year, and I'm sticking to this, that Djokovic can beat Alcaraz at the Grand Slam level, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to beat Sinner. Now, the best surface for Djokovic to beat Sinner is going to be grass. But Sinner is a lot better on grass than people think. His background in skiing is coming in very handy on grass because Sinner said in the post-match interview that last year it took him about a week to start getting comfortable sliding into his shots. And this year, he's been sliding from the first round on. So the more he plays on grass, the more comfortable he is sliding into his shots. And Sinner said that sliding into his shots, especially on that 2-handed backhand where he slides with his left foot, is something that's very important for him. I've said it before, his movement might not look quite as elegant as Novak's movement or Carlos's movement on grass, but the quality of his movement is very close to those guys. Not quite the same. I still would put Djokovic and Alcaraz a little bit above Sinner, but Sinner is very close in movement. On top of that, he can whip those ground strokes, and players have said that they feel so much pressure when they play Sinner. I could compare it to what players have said about Federer when he hits forehands. He is so aggressive, he doesn't give you any time to breathe, and I think Sinner is very similar, but it's not only his forehand, it's also his backhand. He forces you to hit faster to keep up with this ball speed, which causes more errors if you're not accustomed to raising the speed of your shots. And if you play a tad too defensive, you're going to get blown off the court. Now, Sinner's key to win this tournament is going to be his serve. And if he has an up and down serving performance like he had in the Roland Garros final, I think this is where Djokovic and, of course, Alcaraz will have a chance against Sinner. But let's talk about some of the other matches on the top half of the draw. And while Sinner and Djokovic are looking to clash in the semifinals, their road to the semis is going to be more complicated. Sinner plays a fantastic grass court player, but Dimitrov. Guys, as you heard there, my mic cut out and there was a whole segment that I recorded. And this was actually the second time my mic had cut out today. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm having a lot of technical difficulties. Hopefully they're going to be solved by tomorrow. But the point that I was making is that both Sinner and Djokovic will have more difficult opponents in the fourth round and in the quarterfinals as well. I do think the biggest challenge for Sinner, if he passes the Dimitrov test, which he probably will, the last few times they played, especially that Miami final, was absolutely brutal for Dimitrov against Sinner. They played another time after that at Roland Garros last year, where Dimitrov lost in straight sets, but he did get into a tiebreak in one set. As good as Dimitrov is on grass, he doesn't possess enough weapons to challenge Sinner. But I do think that Shelton, who will most likely take out Sonego, who came through an absolute marathon match against a very good Nakashima. Shelton is on absolute fire. He's serving well. I think he will be Sinner's quarterfinal opponent, and that's going to be a big challenge for Jannik. And I'll discuss this matchup in more detail if it gets to it. A player that I haven't discussed in great detail is Koboli, and I'm very impressed by him. I made a mistake prior to the tournament starting, and I picked Menchik to beat Koboli. I'm learning more about some of the weaknesses that Menchik has when it comes to grass courts, and having a huge serve is just not enough. He has some issues in his baseline game and also with his movement. I do think he can improve upon that and maybe a few years from now be a threat on grass. But Koboli in that third round match against Menchik was simply the better player, a phenomenal athlete. I watched him win that Hamburg tournament. I watched him take out Fonseca and Halle. A phenomenal player with a big upside, and I think he's gonna provide a big test to Marin Cilic in the fourth round, who miraculously won 3 matches at this year's Wimbledon. Maybe so far the story of the tournament. Marin will have to serve exceptionally well, and if they get into a lot of baseline rallies, it's going to be advantage Koboli. But as I said in this video, doesn't matter who wins that match. I think it's going to be a big roadblock in the quarters versus Djokovic, who plays de Minaur in the fourth round. And while he has lost to him once at the United Cup, I don't think Alex has enough weapons to pull off the upset against a Djokovic that's playing at this level. Guys, my apologies again for the audio problems, and I will work hard to solve this, and I will see you in another video tomorrow.